best introduction in the universe. This is about transferring the leadership or the responsibility of a community specifically, but it can be applied to any position, any role, any task. It could be scaled to on a non-technical point of view, but because the three of us are professional athletes, we thought we would use sports metaphors in the title because we know what we're talking about. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that for this slide. I'm the only one without a controller of the slides.
Which means we have the power.
Which means I have to be a jerk. And just in case you're wondering, this isn't a situation where you just like flip the table and walk out of the project. This is more about caring what happens to the future of your project, caring about what happens to the community, so you can't just force quit.
There you go.
So we're going to introduce ourselves. I think Rich is first.
Oh, you keep flipping the slides. So
I think we're both switching at the same time.
So my name is Rick Bowen, and I'm up on stage because I'm driving the slides and no one else is.
Nope, I put the remote down.
I wear a number of different hats. I used to be the RDO community manager, which is a place where Red Hat is involved in the OpenStack project. And at the moment, I am the CentOS community manager. I'm also involved in the Apache Software Foundation, where I'm a board member, and so I've had some experience with a bunch of other open source projects over the years.
I'm up next. Cool. I am the only one on stage who does not work for Red Hat, although I did contract for a short time, which is why I'm up here. But my name is Mary Thingvall. You can find me on Twitter, Mary_Grace. I worked with developer communities for over 10 years now, and these days run my own company, working with other companies, figuring out strategy for developer relations and community building, and also do contract work at times, which is how I wound up with these two. But I'm really passionate about driving the developer relations industry forward and providing resources for people who are doing this professionally. So I just, as in like 2 days ago, held it for the first time, published a book on the business value of developer relations. I also have a newsletter and a Slack channel and other things that I do in addition to working with companies, helping them figure out what they should be doing around the lines of community building.
I'm Rain Leander, and until I still would not claim the community manager role as a title. I would say that I am taking over responsibilities and that I am a liaison between Red Hat and OpenStack and anyone else. I was in support for a long time, and I was in engineering, and I traveled too much and spoke too much at conferences and ended up over in a new department because I talk good. And that's kind of how we got here, is that I was traveling around, I was running into Rich. I happened to be coding within RDO, within the OpenStack world, but I would see Rich, who was the community manager, and I would go help him with booth duty, or I would be on stage and I would be like, Rich, can I have some swag to hand out? And he would, give me some stuff that I would give away. And so that's the order that we came to the RDO community. Next slide, please. And that's kind of how this talk was born. And so we've divided into 3 sections to where we kind of talk about RDO very briefly, but as I said, this is relevant to so much more than that. Basically, why should you care? Not necessarily about RDO, but about what we're talking about today, and then what the actual logistics behind that are. Like, how did we physically do it? What are the deliverables? How do you actually hand over a community or a section of the community or a specific project within a section of the community? So
the specific project that we're talking about here is RDO. It is a distribution of OpenStack. And I was the community manager for this project for about 4 years, having inherited that from someone else. And open source communities they're kind of like families in many ways. They have weird traditions. They have your slightly unusual uncle with his strange idiosyncrasies, and these are things that as a community manager you become very familiar with how the community works, how the different people in the community interact with each other. And so when the opportunity came for me to move to a different community, which was CentOS, and Rain stepped up, we started talking about how we can transition some of that knowledge in an effective way.
As a matter of fact, we started talking before I was officially switching over, even, or anyone knew. But we kind of knew it was happening, but also Rich ended up finding, oh, well, if I write this stuff down, it actually is beneficial to myself as well. Officially, I took over April of last year, April 1st. Which is hilarious because on same day I found out I was pregnant with twins, which would explain why my glasses no longer worked, and I was throwing up all the time, and I didn't come to work for a year. Now in the Netherlands, you are allowed to be sick, and so if you are sick because of pregnancy, that's it. Just go be sick, get the help you need, and when you're, FYI, when you're pregnant with twins, there's double the hormones. If we want to talk about this later, I'm happy to give you way more information, but we'll just say that I weighed less with twins than I weighed with my first child because of complications. And because of the way the Netherlands is set up, you can be sick because of pregnancy, you have maternity leave, and then you actually have a ramp-up time after maternity leave. And during maternity leave, the government pays the company you work for. And so Red Hat knew that they would have 4 months of extra money. And because of how difficult that pregnancy was, they went, you know what? Rich is now doing 2 communities for 6 months. Why don't we take this money that we know is coming and hire a consultant?
Hi.
Et voila.
Yeah, so I stepped in basically to help Rich and make that transition easier for him. Took some of the stress off of his plate, took a lot of the just logistics off of his plate. So that's our very unique situation. But why do you care, right?
Because you're probably not pregnant with twins in the Netherlands. Or if you are, that's cool too. But,
yeah. But that's probably not your situation. So let's say you're content in your job, you like where you're at, you have no plans to immediately move on, which is great. But why is this relevant to you? And there's a couple reasons. First of all, I think we switched slides. Nope.
it could be.
So we're gonna talk through why this is relevant to you, but could be just a need for documentation on your team. A need to write down some of those idiosyncrasies that only you know because you're the one that's interacting with the community on a regular basis. It also opens up time for you to be able to, take a vacation, which is hard when you're a community manager and you feel like there's a lot on your plate and a lot that only you can do. And so it gives you a little more flexibility, it opens up your availability, lets you pass things off to other people as well, all of which we'll be talking about soon.
That's an excellent introduction. Let's talk about the first part of that, which is what do you do? So a lot of times, I don't know about you, but you might get to the end of your day and you're like, what did I work on today?
I know I did 18 different things.
I know I was productive. I know I was fairly focused and efficient, but I haven't written anything down per se or in one place. And a month later, you have that same thought. I know I did stuff this month, and so this is on a like scale of 1. This is about writing down what you do so that you know what your regular tasks are, which is great when your boss comes and says, "How was January?"
Or you're trying to make an argument for headcount, and you're able to just go, here's the 25 things that only I am responsible for, and I need help with these things.
So especially as a community manager, which a lot of people think we just fly around the world and drink beer.
Wait, that's not what we do.
Not the whole year.
Oh, that's fair.
There's like some stuff that we also do besides that.
Just a few things.
And one of the side effects of writing this down was I had several people say to me, I had no idea that you did all of those things. We thought that you manned the booth at events and that was about it. So it was helpful for the extended team as well to see what we did.
So theoretically that garnered more respect from other people. But also it feels good for yourself. It's simultaneously an ego boost from, oh yes, I am not the imposter I thought I was, to, oh yes, I'm not just flying around drinking beer, but also you can show other people more easily
The value that you're bringing to the company, to the community, to everyone around.
And it really comes down to 3 things of that writing down.
So it allows you to focus what you're working on, because you can see, here's the main 5 things that I have for this year, my main goals. But then I've got these 20 other tasks that I'm responsible for on a regular basis, none of which apply back to these 5 goals. That's a problem, right? So it lets you focus, lets you identify the tasks that you're actually doing and what you're actually responsible for. Because I know, at least for me, I have a hard time realizing all of the little things that I do. So, I need to write a blog post today, and I need to have this meeting with a client today, and I need to prep that talk. But then there's emails I'm taking care of, there's Slack groups that I'm taking care of, there's 10 other things that I do, but if I don't accomplish those 3 goals, it's hard for me to say I had a productive day. So it lets you identify all of the issues that you're going through and all the things that you're doing. And then lastly, it lets you clarify, which kind of summarizes both of those, right? It lets you figure out, okay, if here's everything that I'm doing and here's my 5 goals, maybe my goals need to change. Or maybe I need to take another look at, can I hire some of these things out? Can I pass those off to other people on the team? All of those types of things. So as far as you're concerned, it helps you figure out exactly what you're doing, what you're responsible for, and how to keep going and be productive in the best ways.
It can also help you identify the things that you are in fact wasting time on because they're not focused on your goals. They're peripheral. They're unimportant. A side effect was that it helped me identify some of the events that I was going to that were really not a good use of my time and budget, and I was able to eliminate those.
It also lets people volunteer.
By the way, we have pictures in here that are literally taken within the past 24 hours, and this is an actual buoy that does not exist next to a canal that does exist that you can drown in. There's no life support.
It's a good analogy for not documenting things and not having things written down.
So in doing this, we started a Google spreadsheet that was Red Hat only, and then all of a sudden when Mary wasn't a Red Hat only person, we had to switch it to outside of Red Hat. So we're discovering all kinds of accessibility, but also we would take chunks of that document and literally just publish them on rdoproject.org and be like, hey, I need someone to help me reserve space. Here is exactly how to do it, and could somebody take over that one section? And that's brilliant, because like some things you don't want to publish on your community website per se, we'll get into that later, for no specific reason, just hypothetical reasons. And there are some things that you want to be accessible to everybody because you want other people to step up.
And also, it allows you to get stuff off of your plate. Some of the things that Rich was saying about, you know, here's all of these things I was responsible for and all these things that I was doing, some of which weren't necessary. It's a problem that I've run into with the Slack group I mentioned earlier, the DevRel Collective, that, you know, we've got a handful of admins and there's all sorts of things we want to do and want to be involved in, and we don't have a ton of extra time. And so being able to put that, we use GitHub, and so being able to put those as issues in our GitHub repo and saying, here's the things you can help with, and then we have a help needed channel, so if anyone has extra time in the community, they can hop in there, oh yeah, I can totally make that fix to the website, no problem, and check that off the list.
And it helped identify some of the things that literally only I could do, because either because I knew something or because I had a script that only lived on my laptop that did something, and being able to document that and make that accessible to a wider audience allowed us to say, hey, anybody can pick this up.
So, the question that we were asking today, you know, even if this doesn't apply to you right now, is it really something you're going to want to be doing for the rest of your life? And maybe community management is, but community management for this specific project. And that's kind of the situation that Rich found himself in, right? He loved the RDO community, but there was another opportunity, and he decided to move into the Semper's community, which is awesome. But it gives you a ready-made, if you're doing this beforehand, it gives you a ready-made transition plan to be able to say, hey, look, everything's written down already. I can actually make that transition far sooner rather than having to scramble in those last 2 weeks after you've given your notice to make sure that everything's documented and written down.
So, toward that goal, I started jotting down some notes about what I did each day. And this went from a few notes to a 23-page document that
It's a little intimidating.
Yeah, that detailed everything at a level that I thought somebody else could pick it up and take it on. You know, of course, it would take them weeks to read the document and understand all of it.
And he was very careful about, like, sectioning it off with headers and subheaders and everything. And I remember the very first time I opened it was before there was Mary, or twins, or even officially switching. It was just unofficial, and it already was 7 pages long. And the table of contents went off the page, and I was like, okay,
And close.
I can do this. And that was before.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are in this document that you're going to be writing. And bear in mind that it's not just for handing over, it's also for yourself. The first thing that you want to document are the goals of your project. And you know, we are talking specifically about open source projects here, but this can apply to any occupation. Clearly defining what you do and why you do it helps focus everything else in the document. And as you're writing, you can look back and you can say, well, that doesn't really reflect these goals, so let's just get rid of it. So it's an opportunity to do some house cleaning as well.
Becomes your North Star of making sure that everything you're doing in the day-to-day lines up with what those top goals are.
And that can involve a lot of introductions, a lot of reading and whatnot. And we had these 2 things as separate things, and then Rich goes, when you took over, I forwarded a bunch of emails, didn't I, from the previous RDO manager? And I said, no, you didn't. that didn't happen. And then all of a sudden I got more email. So that was cool. But having those specific emails listed somewhere or referenced somewhere or published somewhere is a good thing. It's a brilliant thing.
Some of the things that were in the reading list were discussions about the founding of the, emails from all the way back at the beginning of the project, bylaws, governance documentation, technical documents around the project, and I do encourage you to read the entire documentation of a project, which can be a real time investment. And during that process, you find things that are outdated and wrong. And I also provided, or intended to provide, a YouTube playlist of presentations about the project that gave kind of a background. Of course, Rain didn't need this background because she'd been involved with the project for a couple of years at this point anyway.
Right, but you don't necessarily want to assume that I knew, for example, where a sub-project came out of, because we've had that conversation as well, where I was like, so why do we have 2 installers? And oh, well that's because, great, do we have that written down? No, we probably shouldn't write that down. Okay, so what can we write that down? You know, and
how do we make sure we don't lose that information for future people, right?
yes.
The next thing that was in this document was the dramatis personae, which is what they say in the theater world, the list of characters. And these are the important people in the community, the poisonous people in the community, the problem children in the community, the community elders who have the ear of the project, sort of the opinion influencers. The quiet people that are doing a lot of work behind the scenes that you may not know just by looking at the mailing list. And one thing that I discovered in this process is, while this is an extremely valuable thing to do, you want to be careful how you do it. So the story behind this is that I wrote this list of characters and I described some of the people that were problems in the community. And I was very specific about how they were problems in the community. And then this document got shared with a much wider audience than I intended. And one of those individuals read what I had said about him, and we had an interesting conversation that came out of that, which ended up well, but it could have gone so much worse. So this is something that you want to write as a separate document and hand confidentially to the person that needs it.
Or maybe just verbally, but that's up to you and your discussion.
Yeah, and so some of this conversation we had over breakfast in Amsterdam one morning.
Yeah. And there's pieces of that you know are completely fine written down, and other pieces where maybe you just add more color in person or over a video call or things like that.
Not in a recording.
Not in a recording, yes.
Now, in the case of a project like OpenStack, there are also relationships with other projects, such as CentOS and Ceph and Gluster and so many others, and also the corporate relationships. And so giving an understanding of how that works and who the players are in that space is also a critical part of this.
So the next piece is writing down all of the regular tasks. And Rich did this in an amazing way that was incredibly helpful, that went through, cool, here's things that I do on a daily basis. Here's what I do on a weekly basis. Here's what I do on a monthly basis. And having it broken down in those segments was huge for me, coming in and going, okay, what can I get off of his plate most quickly? What are the things that I can relieve him of that I can go, you know what, that thing that you do every single day, I can take care of that. And that's 10, 15 minutes back, which isn't that much, but the transition time exactly, it adds up. Meetings are part of that, and so making sure that the person you're handing stuff off to has documentation of all of the meetings you attend, why they're relevant meetings, whether or not they're important enough to get up at 5:30 in the morning for, because yay, international companies. And I live in San Francisco, and there were some meetings that were 5:30 a.m. and I went, do you really need me there? And he was like, no, don't worry about that. But kind of ranking them in order of like, this is a necessary thing for you to do every week, and I understand it's this early, but this is a really important meeting for you to be at. And then also, as you're introing them to those meetings, making sure that you are giving them access to those meetings, because some of them you aren't responsible for, right? So communicating to the person who leads the meeting, you now need to add this new individual. And then also attending those meetings with them to make sure that they're aware of, cool, do you remember when this person said this thing during the meeting? Make a note of that. Keep an eye out for these types of conversations. Keep an eye out for these projects as they get mentioned, and kind of walking them through what's important and what the key points are that they need to be paying attention to during those events.
Something that I tried to do was attend those meetings, and when a question or comment was directed to me, I would make a big deal of saying, "This isn't me anymore. Please address Rain with your questions." And so that the people in the audience in the meeting understood that there was a transition going on.
Yeah. I mean, our situation was very luxurious in that you don't always have access to transitioning out, plus a transitioning in, plus a consultant who temporary, and I realize that. So in certain cases, of course, you will have to make modifications to your plans. But absolutely, that was amazing. I will also say that by having the daily, weekly, monthly, annual things, like when I travel, I literally have things written down that I'm dropping that this week, and that's okay. And it's a lot easier to see for me for traveling and having all that beer.
Also, this doesn't necessarily end when the transition is completed. This morning, I got email from somebody asking me to do something in the RDO community, and so I made a point of saying, "This isn't me anymore, please ask Rain to do this." And this is maybe somebody that has an annual event that I haven't talked to since this time last year.
So this was fun.
As you can tell, there were pictures taken this morning. The slides were done, mind you, but
I was like,
takes pictures.
"Mary, look like you're making a wish." Great. At a certain point, when we had figured out the daily, weekly, monthlies, the annual events, and I was mostly doing everything, Rich pings me and he goes, "All right, I've got an extra sheet that I haven't shown you yet," which is always fun,
exciting.
yay! And it literally was titled "That Which Remains Undone," which I appreciated the gravitas behind it. And it was a list of things that were hadn't necessarily been taken care of entirely, or that had been dropped, a ball dropped literally or not literally, or was a pie in the sky hope for a modification. And this wish list was then linked because I have my own sanity version of the handover document, which is basically links and makes it much neater and smaller and digestible. And this wish list is on there, and I have followed up 2 of them. But it's still there because those are things that still need to be taken care of, and I still add to it, actually. Okay, that's a great request, but I still have a ton of other things to do, so I'm putting it here.
And these are the things that tend to get missed when there's a transition doc, right? Because, cool, here's my daily stuff, here's what I'm actively doing. You hardly ever get to the, here's what I want to do, because that's usually rolling around the back of your head and not communicated to other people.
And hopefully you have it in a ticket tracker, but
exactly.
Most of the time.
Right. But yeah, keeping track of this is important. Speaking of things to keep track of, credentials can be rather difficult as well. And sometimes this is going to be, sharing a team folder via LastPass or 1Password or whatnot. Sometimes it's going to be getting on a video call and them verbally telling you what the password is on your phone and spelling it out for you 3 times. But making sure that that person has credentials for all of those things. And that they can log into all of the social media accounts and all of the various Google Drive folders and everything else that they might need access to.
It also means realizing what you very quickly put onto your personal credit card in order to make a project move forward, and you kind of need to not have that on your personal credit card anymore.
Right.
There was also a time when we discovered that a lot of accounts were tied to my personal email address, and we transitioned all of that stuff to a role address that multiple people could access.
Yeah.
Which is easier for some credentials than others. Some don't work that way, but most of them we've got transitioned, I believe, at this point, right?
Maybe. So that's it, right?
Yes, that's it. There's
Done.
nothing more to do. I'm done.
All good.
No, it's never done, and this document, I was actually looking at it while we were preparing this talk, and the document has big sections of it that are now completely out of date, incorrect. need to be updated, and this is always a living document.
Right. As you can see, edits are necessary sometimes. It's not the actual document, but it felt like it some days. Because I was going into the Google Doc and making suggestions, and so then you wind up with things struck out and extra things added, and you know how it goes. But the biggest thing for me coming in and being the in-between person was that I was coming in, and this is a doc that Rich had written for Rain initially, and so
OpenStack people.
right. And I'm
Not
coming in
an
as a non-OpenStack person. I have some experience with open source and some experience with development, but not to that extent. And so coming in going, what's this abbreviation? What does that word mean? Who is this person? What are all of these other things that we have to handle along the way? And so making a lot of edits, making a lot of suggestions, asking a lot of questions to flesh it out a little bit more.
There were also places in the document where I had said things assuming a lot of knowledge that wasn't there. Just assuming that everyone knows these things, which of course they don't.
Right. Like we mentioned earlier, this lets you prioritize, you know, what's urgent. So I came in, like I said, and cool. What are the biggest things that I can take off of What are the biggest things that I can take off of Rich's plate, right? What are the most important things that these are getting dropped and we have to handle this? What are the things that it's only a monthly thing, but the newsletter has to go out every month? So what do I have to do to prepare for that? And so being able to look through that document and go, okay, I'm going to start here, which means we still have these things. And we continue to do that when Rain came back too.
Like I said, I ramped up. I didn't go from maternity leave to full-time immediately. And I was given 20 hours, 40 hours, some number of hours that I could still be like, Mary, what's up? This is you. And I left that newsletter in her hands as long as possible, because that one really scared me for some reason. And it wasn't until towards the end when this is a whole other talk. She was like, this is how you do a newsletter. This is how you don't do it at the last second. This is how you probably blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, I could totally do that.
Yeah,
You should
give a
write
talk about
that down.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. You should write that down and post it on a blog somewhere.
There you go.
So it becomes don't be scared to make changes. Don't be scared to edit. Don't be scared to ask questions. But also
Balance.
Yeah, also, respect the traditions that exist and make sure that you are able to distinguish between what's important and what you can jettison.
Yes.
And so, really embrace it and make it your own like Rain has done. But there are certain things about our community, like, the ducks, that you can't just get rid of.
I will never change the ducks.
No.
There will always be ducks.
But remembering to listen to your community, right? And if there's something that you might not think is a big deal and you float it in a meeting 1 week and everyone goes, wait. Or if there's dead silence afterward, right? So listening for both the silence of like, wait, maybe that's a mistake, as well as the active feedback saying, no, please don't change that thing.
This is everything we talked about. It's really the key is communication, which we all kind of already know. Writing down, editing, and asking questions. And don't be afraid to redact. I specifically put that in when we talked about that doc that got shared. Even I was like, oh yeah, don't forget to maybe just not make that available online.
And even if you're not planning on transitioning out right now, maybe you start a doc and then put a to-do in your calendar on a quarterly basis, right? That you go back through and update any relevant people, any things that have changed, any events that have changed, everything else along the way. But keeping that up to date as you go rather than having to scramble into it at the very end.
So we have about 5 minutes left. We'd love to hear your stories or your questions.
And I've got a microphone if anyone wants.
Oh yeah. We stole the questions microphone, so you actually have to talk to Mary.
Okay.
Great.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I had a question on the emotion. I mean, it's more directed to Rich, but is it hard to leave a project? I mean, when you transition to, because I guess you did more than other people, so how you manage that? Because you attach to this project, you spend a lot of years dealing with the community and things. And
Yeah.
is there a way to make, because I guess in some cases it can be a bit difficult to leave something in.
It attached to the community, both the people and the technical aspects of it. You have a real ownership. I mean, I was in this for 4 years, so I really felt like it was my project. And so there were things that I was reluctant to hand over. And there was actually an incident early on where Rain made a decision to do something differently than I had. And I just had this visceral reaction to it. You can't do that. And after thinking about it over a weekend, I was like, it's not what I would do, but it's also not a bad decision. And it's hers now. So one thing that helped me move on is that I'm moving into another awesome community. And so moving into another exciting opportunity is a way to let go of that. But yeah, it's hard to let go. And yeah, the answer is yes. It is very difficult.
It's also hard to take over as well. Like, I feel like this first year has been about doing almost exactly what Rich has done in the past without many changes. And then every once in a while, if I come to something that's undocumented, undone, never doesn't have input, then I do my own thing. But there was something early on that I handled one way. But then I was also able to say, because Rich and I are still on the same team, still at the same company, whatnot, we talked it out, and then it was resolved. Whereas if I hadn't been able to talk to Rich, I might have just been like jumping off a cliff and it not working out. So having that document is totally key.
And knowledge has a very short half-life, and so there are questions that Rain can ask me now that I'm like, I don't remember. And then also the individuals involved. A lot of the important individuals in the community that were involved are no longer there. So particularly within the company, the management has moved all around.
And I think that's important to remember as a new person coming in too. That like, look, people have changed, management has changed. It's not all the same people in the community, and you're new. So if you do make a mistake that's not able to be undone, you can go, sorry, I'm new, can you help me next time, right? And use it as a way to reach out to the community and acknowledge.
Yeah, that's also a real opportunity to go in there and break things and investigate and, even to try brand new things, and then you can always fall back on
right.
new.
Figure out what you can and can't break.
If you're aware of that going in, you can actually use that opportunity to your advantage. And I'm still doing that in Centos, don't tell anybody.
Does anyone else have any questions, comments?
Hi, is this now a general practice in Red Hat? Have you heard from some other colleagues like doing the same, maybe in different positions? Have you encouraged this, maybe?
We have encouraged this, but we are still experimenting, and this is literally the first time this has been talked about in public.
I've not seen places where people have done this intentionally.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would definitely encourage other people to do it. That's why we're doing this talk. But no, I haven't seen it done this intentionally.
I did it at one other job, and it's nice to be able to document things because when you go on an extended vacation, you can go, here you go, here's everything I was doing. I shattered my wrist a few years back and like was out of commission for a full 2 months. Like was not online, was not allowed to be online, was not allowed to be on my computer, and being able to have a 5-minute phone call and go, here's the Google Drive folder that you need to go to find all of my information about everything I've been doing. And like there might be people you don't know, but generally the day-to-day stuff that I was responsible for, you can do that. Is huge. Doing it at the end of the job is nice as well. The only thing that I ran into a couple times with trying to push things off on other people once it was documented was the team was like, well, but you're here. So why would you stop doing
Why would
that?
I take over?
You're not leaving.
Yeah.
Well, right, but if you take that over, falls under your job more so than mine, then I can do these other things that only I can do. And so letting it kind of free up your time can be a nice reason to do it in that moment as well.
We are completely out of time, but if you want to contact any of us, those are our Twitters on there, and we'll be